Masque of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. The Red Death has long run rampant in our country. No plague has been so quick, so gruesome as this one. Blood is its mascot, its seal. It began with sharp pains and dizziness, then profuse bleeding of the pores with dissolution. Those who caught the plague were dead in half an hour. Now Prince Prospero, a beloved man, ever so graciously invited 1,000 royals into one of his many abbeys. Once inside, they locked the door, boarded the windows, and were promised a time of fun while the world turned red with blood from the plague. Towards the 5th or 6th month of their seclusion, while the plague ran rampant, Prince Prospero ordered a grand masquerade. Now Prince Prospero was a queer man with peculiar tastes and styles. His abbey consisted of 7 rooms arranged in a sort of spiral shape. There were sharp turns every 20 or 30 feet, and a large Gothic window in the middle of each wall. It had large curtains that correlated with the theme of the room which it opened to. Each room was a different color. The first was blue, the second was purple, the third was green, the fourth was orange, the fifth was white, the sixth was violet. Now the 7th room was shrouded in a heavy velvet curtain. This was the only room where the panes of glass did not match the room, for the glass was scarlet, a deep bloody color. There was also a tripod bearing a burning fire that illuminated the room with an eerie glow. Its flame distorted the shadows of any who entered, and there were few who did so. In this room, among the western wall, a gigantic ebony clock loomed. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull click and clack, and when the hour was struck, it would bellow out a sound. An exceedingly musical one, but so peculiar a note that all of the revelers stopped their dancing and listened to this with fear in their hearts. Afterwards, they would share a nervous giggle and continue on with their festivities until the clock chimed again. In spite of these things, they had a grand time. Prince Prospero had an eye for bizarre colors and effects. His plans were bold and fiery, and his conceptions glowed with a barbaric luster. There were some who considered him mad, but his followers were sure he wasn't. But one needed to hear, see, and touch him to make sure. He had directed the guests to dress bizarre and to be sure that they were grotesque. There was much glitter and glare. There were figures with limbs unsuited for their bodies. There were delirious fancies such as madmen's fashions. There were much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre, something of the terrible, and not a little of that would excite. The 7 rooms were roamed to and fro, and the clock struck once more in the velvet room. The revelers were still and quiet once again. When it ended with the sound of the orchestra, the party continued. Throughout the masquerade, all of the rooms were roamed, but the velvet room. The night continued to wane away, and in the velvet room, the light was coming through the blood-colored panes, and the blackness of the drapery was appalling. To him whose foot fell on the sable carpet, there comes from the near the clock a muffled peal that no one could hear. All of the other rooms were filled with revelers. The party went on till midnight, and then the clock rung. The people stopped and listened solemnly to the strokes of the clock. While the strokes passed, they had become aware of one certain person and were filled with disgust. The tall and gaunt figure was dressed in death clothes. Most disturbing was his mask, resembling a corpse's face. It would have been approved by the revelers if the mask was not covered in blood. When Prince Prospero saw the man, he was filled with horror. Offended by this man who dressed as the very plague that he wants to avoid, he demanded that he be killed. No one goes towards the man. The figure walks slowly through the rooms. Everyone gets out of his way. In a dash of anger, Prince Prospero rushes at the figure, but right at the feet of it, he dies. The throng of revelers, upset that this man killed Prince Prospero, threw themselves on the figure, only to find themselves on the floor with blood on their brow, dead. The figure, tall and erect, went into the ebony clock. The Red Death had been in the abbey. It came like a thief in the night.